This week we are talking about natural wines. Now, it's a whole huge category of wines that has lots of ambiguity and confusion around it. And I'm not saying I'm going to get that cleared up in this video, but what I am going to do today is just taste through a very small selection of some natural wines. But I think it's important just to try and get a definition of what a natural wine is. Now, helpfully, there is actually no legal definition of what a natural wine is, so it's very much adhered to by the principles of individual winemakers and the idea of the kind of the collective responsibility of what it is. But simply put, I like to describe it as nothing added and nothing taken away. So in terms of addition, so nothing being added, there's generally minimal or no sulfur added. And if there is sulfur, it's at incredibly low levels. And then there are no other additions. So it's all about a wild fermentation. So that's using the natural ambient yeast in the winery to start the fermentation. There's no addition of sugars, acids, enzymes, any of the various manipulations that a winemaker can do in the process of making wines. And then that nothing taken away. There's no fining and no filtration. So these wines can often be cloudier or they can throw more of a sediment. But for me, it just means that there's a lot more flavour in there. Anyway, let's have a little taste and see what you think. Now, Prosecco is one of the world's most popular wines. Here in the UK, we absolutely go mad for this stuff. But the Prosecco I'm tasting today is a world away from those large industrial production style Proseccos. This is called a Col Fondo. This is a traditional Prosecco, and the current method of Prosecco was actually developed during the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. And so Prosecco, conventionally made, is in large stainless steel tanks. That's where the secondary fermentation happens. In this traditional Col Fondo Prosecco, everything has taken place in the bottle. Now, Col Fondo literally means with its bottom. So that's in reference to the fact that at the bottom of this wine, there are lees. Those are the dead yeast cells. So when the wine was first made, it was then and had its first primary fermentation. There was still quite a bit of sugar in there, and then it was bottled, a little crown cap was put on, and that secondary fermentation took place inside the bottle. So that's all of the yeast cells eating the remaining sugar, and that's releasing carbon dioxide, but there's nowhere for it to go, so it stays inside, and that's where the bubbles come from. So it's also known as the ancestral method, or and that's this sort of very traditional style of sparkling wine. You may have come across pet nats. They're made in the same way as a Col Fondo. So here we are in the Veneto region of Italy. That's where Prosecco comes from. And we're going to have a beautiful taste of this wine. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit cloudy. That's because it's unfined and unfiltered. Let's get into taste. It's smelling wonderful. We have this lovely lemon citrus. A nice herbal note as well, thinking of things like wild fennel, almost a little bit minty as well. And that all comes through. There's definitely a savoury note to it. Think of something like apple cider vinegar, which is very good for your health. It has that lovely appley quality, but something a little bit more savoury as well, a nice herbal quality, but it's really fresh, beautiful acidity, super dry. If you think of Prosecco, it's quite commonly associated to being a quite sweet wine, but this isn't that at all. It's got really good mouth-watering acidity, very bright, very uplifting, and is an excellent example of a much more traditional style of sparkling wine, and I think is a perfect way to introduce yourself to the world of natural sparkling wines as well. So look out for Col Fondo next time you're thinking of trying a Prosecco. It's going to be totally different, but I think you might just like it. For my next wine, we are in Austria with two brilliant winemakers, Martin and Anna Arndorfer. They're located in the Camptal region, which is just to the northeast of Vienna. Now, they are a wonderful family-run winery. They produce predominantly Grüne Veltliner, which is the Austrian really fabulous white grape variety, but they do it in a very minimal intervention way. And this is their expression of an amber wine or an orange wine. So what that means is that the grapes have been macerated with their skins. So when they press the juice, instead of taking the white grape skins away and just being left with a clear juice, they've left those skins and the juice together so that there's an extraction of colour from the grape skins. And so as a result, you have this sort of ambery, well in this case it's more of a kind of a pale, lovely lemony but cloudy coloured wine. And it's looking very inviting. So it may not look like your typical wine, and you might look at that and think, oh gosh, that's faulty. But again, remembering it's not being fined or filtered, so that gives that cloudiness to it. But remember, I think it brings lots of flavour as well. And you have to taste this with a really lovely open mind, because it's a different flavour profile, but it's definitely something that I think is delicious. So let's have a little smell and taste. So we've got lots of Gruner Veltliner here, tiny touch of Chardonnay as well, and I'm going in. And it's really smelling lovely. You have that very keen citrus, a nice pear note. Really, really very lifeful. It's a very energetic wine. It's enticing me. And that's coming through, searing acidity. Again, I love what I love about natural wines are, it's not just about primary fruit in these youthful wines. You get another layer of flavour that comes through. So you have that citrus, really kind of lemon zest, lime, fresh juice. And there's also this lovely summer herbal note. So really uplifting, thinking of things like cut grass or a really nice meadow. It has a lot of sunshine in there. Again, very uplifting, very energetic, very lifeful, would work well with so many different foods. These are great food wines. So if you're thinking of making perhaps a lovely aromatic Thai style curry, something along those lines, this would cut through beautifully. As I said, Martin and Anna Arndorfer, two brilliant winemakers, and they really do offer great value for money. Generally, natural wines aren't cheap because they're very labour intensive. You have a lot of work that's going on by hand in the vineyard and in the winery, and as a result, you don't get these kind of bargain basement wines. So you really are paying for the kind of the quality of the work that's gone into it. But I think that they always represent very good value for money. So if you find them where you are, it's always worth a try. For my next wine, we are in the south of France. We're right at the area of where the Rhone gives way into the Mediterranean Sea. So it's wended its way through France, and we've cut through the Provençal hills and we're into the sandy landscape of the Camargue, which is a stunning location and it doesn't get enough attention. So this wonderful family winemaker, Chateau Saint-Cyr, have been farming organically for a number of years. They don't fine, they don't filter, and they don't add any sulfur to this wine, and they use all natural fermentation, so it's very much a natural wine, but again I think at a more affordable price point. Not saying it's a cheap wine, but it is more affordable than a lot of natural wines can be. But I'm really looking forward to tasting it. It's looking gorgeous in the glass, so let's have a go. It's smelling beautiful. It has this bursting, bright berry fruit. I've got cherries, blackberries, blackcurrants. It's all just leaping out at me and I like it. And that's all there. Really crunchy, really bright, really fresh. Lovely. The tannins are there, but they're not too aggressive. Syrah is a really lovely grape variety. It can create such a range of expressions and is really quite a noble grape. And this tastes quite refined and really quite elegant. So the tannins are there, but they're pretty velvety. Got lovely acidity, that black currant, black cherry coming through, really nice red fruits as well that meld very beautifully together. So I think with some really delicious things like a lamb tagine. This has worked very nicely with, because you've got the sort of the sweetness of the fruit that you might put into your tagine, matching up beautifully with that. It's a very energetic and lifeful wine. So when you're next looking for something to try, I would definitely have a look out for Chateau Saint-Cyr. We are now back in Italy for this next wine. We're in the Piemonte region with a wonderful producer who's situated around the area of Monferrato. This is 100% Barbera. in his lovely Umberta made by the fantastic Fabrizio Iuli, who says he wants to make gentle and calm wines. So as a winemaker, he's one of the most charming people you can meet. He has this very calming sense about him. He treats his grapes and his land with such care and is a very kind of hands-off approach in the winery as well. So this, I'm imagining, is all going to be about that bright fruit. And let's go in and have a taste. And it is smelling lovely. I've got this sort of little smoky note coming through, a little bit tobacco, which is layered alongside that black currant, blackberry. Nice red currant nose too. And that's coming through. It's still quite taut and quite tight. And that's lovely acidity, really crunchy. Now I love this style of a slightly sort of higher acid wine, but it may not immediately appeal if you prefer those kind of immediately softer, more generous styles of wines. But I think this will actually open up a little bit more as you taste that. And again, imagine you were having a delicious, slow cooked ragu, whether that's sort of more of the lentil, mushroomy style or a traditional meat ragu. I think that would pair beautifully. You have that sort of fleshy fruit. You've got black currants, red currants, raspberries, and that smoky note too. I think Barbera is a great food, versatile, great variety in itself. And here it is in a very pure expression. It's had no oak there, so you're not getting those kind of more vanilla-y flavours. It's all about the bright primary fruit. And it certainly does feel like a very gentle and very calm wine indeed. I think natural wines are great. They offer an absolutely, if you like, pure representation of what wine can be in a very traditional way. They can often come with this sort of fashion status around it, where you have this idea of sort of a certain demographic of people drinking natural wines, but it is an absolute world away from these winemakers and how they intend their wines to be received in the world. These are people who are working really diligently with their land, trying to create something that is sustainable not only for themselves, but for their land, and also to bring great pleasure to us, the wine drinker, as well. So that kind of very hands-off approach might create a style that's a little bit new to you, but I think it's really important to try new things and to experiment. And I think you'll find that the more you taste these wines, the more you fall in love with them as well. And there is such a wonderful array to discover from all over the world. So with that mantra of nothing added, nothing taken away, you really can discover some absolute delights. So cheers to that.